Okay, it's time to discuss CSS ID and class selector. In previous video, we have discussed basic selectors. Now in this video, we'll discuss ID selector and class selector, and we will also discuss the difference between ID selector and class selector. Now what is ID selector? So when an HTML element is given an ID, it serves as a unique identifier for that element. Suppose I have an element h1 within HTML body. Now I want to style it from CSS. So for that I have to give it a class or an ID. If I want to give it a unique identifier, for that we will have to use ID, because ID represent unique as a unique identifier. You can use it as a unique identifier. You can't use for multiple HTML elements. We will discuss it in practical work. Here you can see we have a style we have an ID by the name of a head. Now whenever you want to access an HTML element ID, you have to use hash from within CSS. Now the second thing that we will discuss, that is class selector. When we want to access or style or implement style on HTML element, for that we use ID or class. ID is used for as a unique identifier for a selector or element, but when we use class, it belongs of that class. Suppose if I want to use for paragraph, I want to give a name or class to this paragraph, I want to style it. For that I can use either ID or class. I will use class in that case if I want to use that class for multiple HTML elements. As you can see here, with first paragraph we have given here a class by the name of para. In the second we have used three classes: para, para1, para2. These are three classes. You can use more than one classes within HTML element. Now whatever the style or implementation by CSS of this para class, it will be implemented on this para as well, because class can be implemented on more than one HTML element. You can use one class for multiple HTML elements. So now what is the difference between class and ID? The only difference is that ID is used as a unique identifier. It means you can't use for other elements ID, but you can use class for more than one HTML element. Let's discuss it. Let's do some practical work, but before doing practical, this is my channel, Coding World. If you haven't subscribed, just subscribe it and go to this playlist, and here there are so many playlists. As you can see, CSS tutorial, PHP tutorial, MS Excel, hacking on Android, and C# window form project, HTML, CSS, JavaScript project as well. Now let's jump into VS Code. Let me create first here file by the name of tut for underscore css underscore ids class dot html and enter. Let me zoom in. Okay, now first we need HTML boilerplate. Within this boilerplate we will do some styling. So first we need to use HTML structure. Suppose I have h1, enter. I want to give it an ID, so I can simply type it manually, ID. Now give it a name to this ID, so ID1, and write something. This is ID1. Now let me use another h1. Now I can give it directly, so just write h1 or any element of HTML or tag and give it hash. Now enter, and it will automatically provide you the ID. You don't need to type it manually. So give it name, so ID2. Now let me write something here, so this is ID2. Now I want to style it. So in second video I have told you that you can use three ways: external CSS, internal CSS, or within the body. But for the sake of tutorial we will be using internal CSS. For that we use style. Now within this style we have to access these IDs. Now how to access ID from CSS? So you have to use hash, curly braces. Now within this we have to use properties and values, in simple words, style. Now I want to style this text. and after this hash you have to give the name of this HTML tag, ID name or class or whatever you have. In our case we have ID by ID1, so give it here ID1. Now let's style it. So I want to change its I want to color it, so let me give it color such as red. I want to align it, so text align center. Now let me copy this, Control C, and just paste it right here. Now let me change the ID name, because now I want to style this one, and this has ID2. So just change ID2 and change the style from red to such as blue and center as well. So let me open with live server, and what is the difference? As you can see, we have centered our text and we have changed the color, because we have given first H1 ID1, and the second H1 we have given ID2, and we have separately styled these two IDs. Now I want to update this ID1 with some more style, such as I want to give it background, PG color means background color, black, and I want to give it padding. Now what is padding we will discuss in upcoming videos. For now just focus on your ID and class. So 10 pixel, and font weight such as 500, and font style, fonts not synthesis font style, I want to give it Arial or bold, and font weight, okay, we have already given it. So we have updated, this must be style such as italic. We will discuss this what is font weight, what is font style, padding in upcoming videos. So this is our ID1. Whatever it has style such as color, text, align, background, it will be implemented on this ID. So let me open. As you can see, we have changed background color black, and we have italic our text. Let me zoom in so that you can easily see the difference. Now I want to use the same style on this text. So what I will do, I will simply copy this ID and I will give here a space and paste. Now this ID, it's mean H1, this H1 has two IDs, ID2, ID1. Whatever ID2 has style, it will be implemented on this text, and I want to implement this style, ID1 style, on H2 as well. What will happen if I open with live server? As you can see, there is nothing, because ID is a unique identifier. You can't use the same ID for another HTML element. This is entire an HTML element, and this ID1 has already used for this H1. That's why it can't be used for another HTML tag or element. So this is ID. Now we will use and we will see the difference between ID and class. So let me use here a paragraph, use just dot operator, because we represent class by dot operator, and give it a class. You can give it manually, such as, let me write here class and give it a name, class 1. So I will write here something, this is class 1. Let me Control CV, and this is class 2, and change the class name from 1 to 2. Let's style it. So whenever you want to style an element by the name of class, you have to use here within CSS dot operator. So dot after that class name, so class 1, because I want to style this one. So let me change its color black, not black, let me use here blue, and its BG color such as red. Margin, now what is margin we will discuss in upcoming videos. Padding and margin, it's very important topic. So let me give here 3%. Let me give it border 1 pixel. We will also discuss border because it's very important topic. We use border in our real world websites. So border solid, and color will be red, not red, black one. So we have styled this text, I mean this paragraph, this is an element, and we have given this paragraph a class by class 1, and we have used this class by dot operator, and we have used some style within CSS. Now whatever this class has style, it will be implemented on this one. So let me copy this class 1 and let me paste it right here. Now I want to use some style on this text. So and this paragraph or element has class and by the name of class 2. So change to it class 2. Let me change the color so we can easily differentiate it, and from red to suppose pink, and this from black to green. Yeah, so let me open with live server. So we have two elements, paragraph 1, paragraph 2, and we have styled them both because we have given them classes. So now what will happen if I use this class? This element has a class 1. If I use within the class 2, what will happen? So first let me change here margin. Okay, let me change here margin, and let me change from here border too. Now let me open. As you can see, the second element, I mean paragraph, which has class 2, it has just background color and foreground color, means text color. There is no border and no margin. Now I want to use the first element that has class 1 margin style and border style on the second class. For that I can simply copy this class and I will paste it here. So let me open. See, we have used this element class within the second element class, and whatever it has style, it's implemented on this one as well. It means that we can use a single class style on multiple HTML elements, but in ID case you can't use it. So this is the difference, that ID is used as a unique identifier and class can be used for multiple HTML elements. So that was all about ID and class. In next video we will discuss borders. So see you there.